Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk. Apologise for the small delay getting started. I was having a small issue with OBS connecting to YouTube Studio for some reason. It wasn't that it wasn't working, it was just that it was just perpetually saying preparing stream, and it was just like stuck there. And the only thing I could do was just wait for it to happen. And because the, go live button is grayed out until that happens. So anyway, we're here now. But that was a very, very slightly nervy moment right there. So anyway, I hope everybody is doing well. I have the chat in top chat mode instead of live chat mode, which is no good. Yeah, I hope everyone has had a first good half of your week. We are back. I apologize for not being around on Sunday. I was down in England at my my late dad's house, continuing to go through all of his stuff, and particularly all of his paperwork, of which there is literally a mountain. Basically in the kitchen, there is literally a mountain of paperwork. Much of it going back many, many years. So, like, it's a little bit overwhelming, shall we say. So, I'm having to deal with all of that, and so let's just say I've had to basically spend a little bit of money and hire an industrial shredder for all of that, all of those documents. It's insane. But anyway, that's where I was, and that's what I was up to. And so I didn't get back until quite late on the Sunday, and I was just I was too emotional, and I was too tired and too overwhelmed, basically, to do a show. I thought I would, I thought I might be able to do it, but I did say last week that there wouldn't be a show because I was not really 100% sure how I was going to be feeling when I came back, and I was right. It was a good idea not to do a show, to be honest. Yeah, so I am back, and I am back for a little while now. So the next event that will be happening that will interrupt our flow does not happen until June, when I'll be going down to London for a couple of days, because I will be at Fender HQ in the UK for a couple of days. But that doesn't happen until June, so we've got a few weeks where we can hopefully just go back and forth between Songwriting Simplified and Sunday Night Live. So that's what I'm intending to do over the next few weeks. So, yeah, that's kind of the story. So, Billy Morgan was the first one through the door, followed by Tony Stringer, that's unusual. That doesn't always happen. So, glad you are here, Tony. And then Kyle is here as well. Brett Marlis says, doing my bit for the algorithm. Thank you very much. He says, as a bit of a break from learning new tunes for a new band. Oh, you're in a new band. That's cool. And weighing options for possible computer upgrades. Yes, it is that kind of a season. It is that kind of year, I think, where, especially with, Windows 10 support being pretty much done, a lot of people are buying new machines so that they can have Windows 11. And so, yeah, a lot of people are contemplating the same thing. I've seen that quite a bit. Some of the chat in technical support has been to do with a lot of people wanting to get new computers and what they need to get and that kind of thing. That's really out of scope for this week, but maybe we can talk about that a wee bit on Sunday, where maybe we can talk about what kind of computer you should get, what kind of specifications I would recommend that you have in place for a PC and also for a Mac. being that I have a fabulous, fancy new Mac over there, which is one of those extremely tiny Mac Minis. Um, they are pretty awesome. Those tiny, it's like literally 5 inches by 5 inches by 2 inches, maybe an inch and a half, something like that. But anyway, it's super duper tiny, but it's mighty. It is super powerful, super fast. It beats the shit out of my iMac that I used to have, which was, basically my iMac. I could power it up and then I could go away and have my breakfast and come back an hour later and it would not have fully booted. That's how bad the iMac was. Whereas this one, I just press the power button and within about 30 seconds it's booted and it's ready to go. So it's pretty awesome, and it's got a much bigger screen. It's like, I think it's 25 inch. Is it 25 or is it 27? It's either. I don't want to get the tape measure out, but I think it's either 20. It's certainly bigger than this one. It's in front of me, which is 24 inch. So, and then this one here is also 24 inch. So that one is definitely a wee bit wider, for sure. But it's very, very fast. I like it. I like it quite a bit, actually, for all sorts of things. Let's see who else is here. DJ Vu is here. Steven Wilson, awesome bass player, is here. Zazu Matt is here. Keith is here. Paul Morgan is here. Dwayne is here. I feel like I'm doing the register like I used to when I was a high school music teacher. Long time ago. Let's see. Just Bob is here, which is awesome. Let's see. Yeah. Just Bob says JL's Glasgow, we have a problem, moment averted. Yes, absolutely. Except it would be more likely Edinburgh we have a problem rather than Glasgow. But yes, I like the idea of substituting Houston for Glasgow for sure. The Scottish Space Agency and all of that, because of course we have a space agency. I mean, we lead the world in that kind of thing. So yes. W5 family are also here, which is fabulous. Hello, Craig. Good to see you, my friend. Brett says he doesn't have the gig yet. He's just preparing for the audition. Awesome. Well, I hope it goes very well for you. It's been a while since I've auditioned for a band, that's for sure. But yeah, I can remember the pressure of those kind of things. Especially if you're having to read charts, which most of the bands that I've had to audition for, I've had to read charts. Even if it's for, a funk band or something like that. There was a band I auditioned for years and years ago, maybe like 30 years ago, where it was like Parliament Funkadelic and Tower of Power and that kind of stuff. Now, I knew a lot of the tunes, but these were very different arrangements of those tunes that I had to adjust to. And I had to sight read the charts. And I was doing those on drums way back then, 30 years ago. So yes, I certainly remember the pressure until I decided to start my own band, my own big band. And so, therefore, it was my gig, it was my band, and I decided what happened and who was in it and all of that. So, yeah, Brett says Macs do cost a couple of appendages as well. Yeah, they certainly do. They're not cheap. And, I'm just very glad that, my company provided those, the Macs. So that's cool. DJ Vu says, do you think that the race of different DAWs to capture your attention is a good direction for development? Do I think that the race of different DAWs to capture your attention? Oh, you mean marketing and advertising? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a marketing guy. I've never really understood marketing particularly. Which is why I've always hired other people to do to do any marketing that I've needed done for my band, for the record label I once had, and all of that. They've taken care of all of that kind of stuff for me. So I've just, say, I just give them money and they make the marketing thing happen. And it's the same as, my band, we were signed to an agency and a management agency, and they looked after all of our affairs pretty much. They booked the gigs, and they made sure that we got paid and all of that. Certainly that was at the start, and then I towards the latter years, I kind of took over all of that, and I did all of that myself because it was kind of cheaper to do that. And then one of the guys in the band said, look, I've run a marketing agency professionally before, so I could do all of that. So he did. And that took all of that off my hands. And so he was our he basically got our gigs and all of that, and made sure that we all got paid and stuff like that. And yes, Glasgow is kind of easier to spell than Houston. You're quite right, Bob. Yeah, for sure. Although Houston, I rather suspect that the name possibly has some Scottish roots. Possibly. Because Houston is actually quite a strong surname here in Scotland. There's quite a number of Houstons in Scotland. So I think it's entirely possible that it has some Scottish origins. Not that that has anything to do with NASA, because, the city predates NASA quite a bit. So anyway, this is all not to do with songwriting. So we are all here for songwriting, hence the title of the show, Songwriting Simplified. So if you have questions related to songwriting, composing, arranging, orchestration, instrumentation, music theory, that kind of thing, get those in the chat. Do what DJ Vu and Brett Maher have been doing and start your question with at Jonny Lipsham Studios. It highlights my name in red for me. You don't see it, I see it, and that helps me basically pick out questions from amongst the chat that you guys are having amongst yourselves. So yes, let's get all of those in there. I would appreciate that. So to start us off, whilst we're just thinking about music theory and chord changes and things that I'm very, very passionate about, I'm very passionate about harmony. I thought I would basically talk a wee bit about most common chord changes and why they are the most common chord changes, and how you can make real common chord changes your own and unique and sound good for your music. So we're going to start with the chord changes to the Gershwin song I Got Rhythm, because it's pretty much a set of chord changes that have been used thousands of times throughout jazz history since the bebop era, which is when this song started to be used as a vehicle for the bebop idiom, the bebop language. But if you're not a jazz guy, if you're a metal guy, doesn't matter. You can still use these chord changes. And you can still make these chord changes unique to the genre of music that you work in. And you can also do some interesting things with these. So let's quickly go over the basic chord changes as I know them. Okay, so there are going to be other people that will dispute my interpretation of what the I Got Rhythm chord changes are, but these are the ones that I learned, and quite likely they are a variation of what the original actually is. The basic form of I Got Rhythm is an AABA form, which basically means there's an A section that's repeated, and then there's a bridge in the middle, the B section, and then you return to the A section at the end. And basically the song just goes round and round that form. Okay? So it basically has some fairly easily recognizable chord changes to start with. 1-6, 2-5, and then back to 1. So the original song is in B flat. So we'll do this in B flat, but you can do this in any key. So we start with B flat 7, chord 1, chord 6, which is G7, and then chord 2, which is C minor, and then F7. Okay? And it does this just one time. So you go 1, 6, 2, 5, and then chord 1 gets substituted with chord 3. So we get D minor, and then chord 6, G7 again, chord 2, chord 5, chord 1. And then this time we get chord 1 with the third in the bass, to chord 4 minor, and then we get chord 3, 6, 2, 5, and then we go back around that again. So okay, so that's the first time through the A section. The second time through the A section, there's a slight variation to it because we need to be able to get into the B section. All right, so the second time through the A section, we get chord 1, chord 6, chord 2, chord 5, and then we get 3, 6, 2, 5, then 1 over 3, 4 minor, and then we get chord 1, chord 5, chord 1. And then we get to chord 3 for the B section. But this time, instead of minor, it's dominant. Then 6, and then 2, and then 5. All right, now this time the harmonic motion slows down. So in the verse, or the A section, it's 2 chord changes per bar. But when you get to the B section, it's a chord for 2 bars, right? So we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, and then this one again, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, and then you're back to. Yeah. I'm playing the last bit wrong again. And then you get to. Okay, and that's how you finish it. All right, so you get A, and then you get A with the variation ending, which is 151. Then you get section B, and then you get section A variation again with the 151, and then that's the form that you go round and round for improvisation, for 50 tenor sax choruses, 50 alto sax choruses. Then maybe a guitar player gets up and the guitar player then wants to play 500 choruses, and then eventually you do the head again. And so, so this is a staple of modern jazz chord changes. So there are variations, which I'm going to talk about. Especially if you get into more kind of slow ballad versions, you can actually substitute chords. I mean, you can substitute chords anyway, but if I'm doing a slow ballad version of this with, you know, maybe 50, 60 beats per minute instead of 350 beats a minute or 360 beats a minute, which is kind of what I would normally play that at, which is why I'm struggling to play it, because I'm playing it slow and my brain is getting ahead of myself every time I'm trying to play it. So if I was to play like a slow kind of ballad version of this, I would substitute some of the chords, and this is kind of what I would do. So I would turn these dominant chords into major sevenths for a start. So we would have B flat major 7, and then instead of going to chord 6, which I mean I could do, and then, you know, I could go, you know, so I could do something like that. But how about if we substitute, instead of chord 6, we do flat 2 diminished instead, which basically uses almost the exact same notes. It's just the root that changes. So let's take this dominant 7 built on chord 6 in the key of B flat, which is G7, and let's take the G out, there, and we'll move the G up 1 to an A, so we get the 7 there, and we'll play the 3rd in the bass. And then this will lead us to chord 2, and then we'll do the same going up again, and this will lead us to chord 3, and then 6, 2, 5, and then we could do So there are variations that you can do to make the chord changes fill out a little bit more, depending upon whether you're doing this slow or whether you're doing this up tempo. But even at, you know, breakneck up tempo speeds, you can still do those substitute chords where, you know, you might do So you can kind of still do the same thing with those diminished chords, even at a high tempo. It makes things a little bit more complicated at a higher tempo, but you just have to get your fingers around it. But it's still entirely possible. But yeah, making the chords maybe a little bit more simple will work better for a higher tempo piece. So there's some great variations on this that you can check out. If you want to listen to somebody who can play these changes with phenomenal ease, you've got to listen to Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, but also check out one of Charlie Parker's, I guess, finest students would be the phrase to use, would be Phil Woods, who died just a few years back. Phil has a fabulous story to tell about his encounter with Charlie Parker, which I think is really applicable to everybody. And so his story kind of goes a little bit like, you can find this on YouTube, but it kind of goes a little bit like this. He was a young, upcoming alto sax player, struggling with his sound, not really liking his performances very much, didn't like the way he sounded. He swapped out reeds, he swapped out mouthpieces, he swapped out everything, including the strap, that he thought was the source of the problem of why he didn't like the sound that he was making with his horn and, the way he was playing over chord changes and things. He didn't like it, and he blamed everything, including the strap. So he has just been playing in the pit band for a show, which is kind of what most professional players did back in the 1940s. You played in a theater pit band, and then once the show was done, you would go and you'd find an after-hours place, a club that's open late, like the Three Deuces or something like that on 52nd Street. And on one particular occasion, he was on an intermission between two shows, and somebody came in and when they were just sitting around and said, "Hey, Bird is playing the Three Deuces across the street." And so Phil basically went across there, and he found Charlie Parker playing a baritone saxophone, which of course was not really a familiar saxophone that he played, but it's in the same the same key as the alto. It's just an octave below the alto. And so he was like struggling to make this thing sound anything like good. And the way Phil describes it, it was him and a drummer. And the drummer must have been about 70 years old and was playing on this rubbish thrown together drum set. And they were just jamming. And so Phil walks up to Parker whilst he's playing and said, "Hey, I see you're having not much fun with the baritone." And Bird says to him, "Yeah, this thing is kicking my ass." And Phil says, "Well, I'm playing a gig across the street. I can just go get my alto if you want." So, Bird agrees. So Phil goes off. He gets his horn from the orchestra pit, and he takes it back to the club and he hands it over to Parker. And Parker puts down the baritone and straps on the alto and starts playing beautifully, absolutely beautifully, and making the horn sound glorious. And it's in this moment that Phil basically goes, my eyes were opened and I realized that it wasn't the horn that was the problem. The problem was me. It wasn't the instrument, it wasn't the strap, it wasn't the mouthpiece, it wasn't the reeds, it was none of those things. Bird was making that thing sing like it had never sung before. So the source of the problem, he figured, was him. And so after a few minutes, Parker hands the alto over to Phil and says, "Hey, now you play." And so, Phil is now on the spot and has to play in front of the great Charlie Parker that everybody looks up to. And so he's under pressure. He's on the spot. What's he going to do? So he starts to play, he starts to blow on the changes of a pretty well-known American songbook standard. And as he's playing, there are other musicians that are getting their instruments, and they're starting to join in, and Phil is playing nicely. And as he's playing, Parker comes over to him, puts his arm around his shoulder, and says into his ear, "Sounds real nice, Phil." And Phil says, in the way he tells the story, he says, "That was like a shot in the arm. It was a shot in the arm, and it was a kick up the ass." And he said, he had just spent the afternoon playing the matinee show, and it sounded pretty shit, to say the least. And he said, instead of walking back to the gig, he said, I levitated back to the gig. And he said, and I got on that bandstand and I played the shit out of those songs. And the horns sung just like it had done for Parker. And he said, that was a shot in the arm and a kick up the ass from Charlie Parker. And he said, at that point, he says, I just began to apply myself to my craft and improve myself. And then you hear Phil Woods play with, great pop piano players like Ben Sidran, and then you hear him play with Billy Joel, and he played with Steely Dan. So he was an in-demand session player in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and into the early 21st century. And he's absolutely amazing on the alto sax. And he told that story about his encounter with Charlie Parker almost to his dying day. Fun fact, he married Charlie Parker's widow, Chan Parker. When Parker died in 1955, it was a few years after that Phil Woods married the former Mrs. Parker. So it is an amazing story that I think can be applied to anybody regardless of what instrument you play, whether you are a saxophone player, a guitar player, and even what genre you play in. It doesn't really matter. I think the point here is that a lot of the time we spend trying to find the right settings on our instruments, the right combination. Like if you're a guitar player, you swap out strings because you think the strings aren't really helping you. You play with the electrics, you swap out pickups, you even take the tone and volume pots off the instrument and you switch them for other ones. You change the strap, you change the plectrums that you're using, and you do all of those things thinking that they're going to help you get better. And the point is, they're not. What's going to help you get better is you developing your craft and taking what you learn from other great players. And yes, it's great when a great player, you have that chance encounter with a great player, and that great player basically says that you play great. Now, Phil could have just gone, that's it, I'm done. I don't need to work anymore because the great Charlie Parker has said, I play nice. I don't need to work anymore. I have arrived. Phil didn't take it that way. He took it a completely different way. And that was, this is encouragement. This is gold. This is, he says, I play nice. Now I need to go play nicer and nicer and nicer. And so, I think that's an important thing to, to take into mind. And this can also be extended beyond being an instrument player. Vocalists can do the same. But also your craft as a songwriter. The only way you get better at songwriting isn't with the DAW that you use. It isn't with the notepad and pen that you use, or the pencil that you use, or the software that you use for coming up with lyrics, or the thesaurus that you use, or whatever tools it is you use to help you get words and help you get melodies and help you get chord changes. Those are all good things, and those are all great things, and they can be really, really helpful and really useful. But the best thing you can do is sit and write songs. And you have to write. Sometimes you have to write a lot of shit, to be honest. And from that will emerge really good stuff. From that will emerge really good music and really good songs. I think I have personally probably sat and written maybe 20,000 songs since I started songwriting. I started writing songs when I was like 10 years old. And so nearly 41 years later, I've written probably 20,000 or more songs. But of those, I think I have recorded maybe 100 of them. And of those 100, I would say maybe 30 are the best ones I've written. And of those 30, I think there's 4 that I think are outstanding songs. So, a lot of the stuff that I write never ever makes it outside of Studio Pro or Studio One. And quite often I just end up deleting the song eventually. But over the years, I've got better at doing something that I call recycling, which is, if I write something that I think is a good verse, but it maybe doesn't, the song doesn't go anywhere. It just ends up just being a verse or a set of chord changes with a scratched out melody on the top of it that I kind of like, but I'm not really sure where it's going to go. I save all of those things. And here's the thing. I may end up writing a completely other song, and then I go, you know what? That verse that I wrote actually fits this song better, but not as a verse. Maybe it will work as a chorus or a bridge. And so I will take that and I will bring that in to this other song, where you can have, I will have a verse, and I'll maybe, take a chorus that was written for a completely another song and a bridge that was written for another song, and I'll put all of those things together. And sometimes that's how a song comes together for me. A lot of the work that I do gets done up here in my head. The vast majority of my work, but I like to change things up, and sometimes I choose to not work like that. And I choose to basically just change up how I do things sometimes, because I think it's a good idea. Let's see. Yeah, almost sounds like Embraceable You at that tempo. It's similar chord changes. Yeah, Embraceable You has similar chord changes. They're not quite the same, but similar. John and Bucky Pizzarelli did several incredible versions of this song at breakneck tempos. Yeah, another really good song is Cherokee. That was a standard, and still is a standard, and a lot of modern musicians play the changes from that song. If you want to hear good versions of Cherokee, there's some very, very good, obviously, recordings by Charlie Parker. He played it many, many, many times in his life. But if you're looking for contemporary recordings, look no further than Wynton Marsalis, the trumpet player. There's a version he does with the rhythm section where the tempo is, I would say, about 380 beats a minute. it's absurdly fast. And one of the things that Winton can do is he can do this thing called circular breathing, where he is breathing out and breathing in at the same time, which means he can play continuous lines without stopping. It's a remarkable technique to watch, but yeah, he has such a mastery of the chord changes. And the chord changes to Cherokee are lovely, actually. I've heard Cherokee played slow as a ballad. I've heard it played as a bossa nova. I've heard it, obviously, at 380 beats a minute. And it's challenging to play those changes at either of those tempos. But, I mean, obviously, the slower, the easier it is. It's like Coltrane's Giant Steps. Those changes are easy to play if you slow the tempo down. Much slower from where Coltrane played it, for example. DJ says it's great that you have such jazz inspirations in your work because it really enriches these pieces. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a family of professional jazz musicians. My grandfather had a big band, and my father played professionally in that band from about the age of, I think, 11 or 12. And he played professionally from about that age all the way through until just about 3 or 4 days before he died. So yeah, I grew up with all of that. My dad, my stepdad, my mom, all jazz musicians. My mom is an amazing woman. She won't mind me saying this publicly, but she is really an extraordinary woman because she is a singer. She was a dancer. She's also a comedian. She is hilarious. She does a very, very, very good stand-up routine. She's hilariously funny. She has the driest, most sarcastic sense of humor I think I've ever come across. But the speed of her humor is super fast. She's very, very, very fast. But yeah, I did a number of songs with her. I've done plenty from the Gershwin songbook. I've done plenty from the Rodgers and Hammerstein songbook, where we've taken some of those songs that they wrote for various productions and musicals and things, and reharmonized them and made them sound interesting. So I grew up in a family of professional musicians, and I've been a professional musician since I was a kid as well. I don't perform anymore. I retired from performing in 2020. But I've been performing since I was a kid, like my dad before me. He was performing since he was a kid. So, I pretty much followed in the family business, and I started, I think I played my first paid gig, which, was money in my pocket, when I was probably about 12. I think I was 12. I was either 12 or I was 13. Can't really remember exactly, but I think I was 12 when I got my first check from a gig. And I played all the way through until 2020. So, a lot of years that I put in to playing gigs. But now, the bulk of my work is working for Fender, and also I do a lot of recording work, both here in the studio and at other studios. And I write songs for other artists. I write arrangements. I do a lot of arranging work. For all sorts of groups and in all sorts of genres. I've done string arrangements for all sorts of things. I've done choir arrangements. I've done lots and lots of things. Because if you're going to be a professional musician, one thing you have to do is you have to find a way to basically diversify your revenue streams, because just playing gigs ain't going to cut it. It's not going to provide you with a regular, steady income. Whereas if I do things like writing arrangements, like doing recording work, and all of those things as well, then, you can diversify your revenue streams and you can make a lot more steady money. And of course, working for Fender is a monthly paycheck, which is great. But it's not the only thing I do to keep the wolf from the door and be able to, for my wife to be able to fill up the car with gas and pay our bills and stuff like that, and get my kids to school, send my daughter to the United States on a university soccer scholarship program, which is the thing that's going on at the moment. That costs a lot of money, so I have to write a lot of charts and do a lot of recording work. But yes, I also I do lecturing as well. So I will teach composing and arranging at university and things like that. So yeah, it's really hard to just make it as just a performing musician. Not really a thing I recommend doing just that on its own, because I don't think it works these days. Just Bob says, I've got more songs / poems than I will ever record music to, but I already hear the finished product in my head. Either way I hear it, and those that get pulled out are supposed to be heard by others. Yeah, that's entirely how I work. The last record that I actually put out, embarrassingly, is 10 years ago, and that's my Belonging to Tomorrow EP. I've done a whole bunch of other things since then, but I just haven't actually got round to recording a batch of new songs. I've got a whole bunch of songs that are pretty much ready to record. I just haven't actually got to that point where I am ready to record them. And then there's also finding the right musicians and the right combination of musicians that I want to record those songs with. Because that's the thing about my approach to songwriting. It's not just the song, it's the right musicians performing on that song. So, like you, Bob, I hear the arrangement finished in my head. And then it's a case of, finessing that so that I'm writing the right parts for the right musicians who I know are going to give me the tone that I want. So, I'll give you an example. So there are horn section arrangements that are in the Belonging to Tomorrow EP. And I don't just write, when I'm doing that for myself, I don't just write a horn section arrangement that can be played by any trumpet player, any alto sax player, any tenor sax player, any trombonist, and any baritone sax player. I have specific musicians in mind that I am writing those for. So I know that my trumpet guy, who is formerly of my band, can play extreme high notes, register stuff with ease. And, I know that my tenor player can play altissimo register, again, with ease, with, all the false fingerings and all of that. And my trombone player has this beautiful bell-like tone. So I write my parts for those musicians, not just for a trumpet player, not just for an alto player, but for these specific trumpet players and alto players, for example. That's a big part of the sound that I get on that record. So, part of the reason why some of these songs that I've got that are ready to go haven't been recorded yet is because the musicians that I want to record them are not available at the moment. So, or I just haven't saved up enough money to be able to afford them yet. Like, for example, guitar solos are usually done by my friend Tim Rose. And Tim is a professional guitar player. He's played with a whole litany of great artists. you know, he's a very busy guy because he's a very, very highly in demand session guitarist. So he's doing a lot of recording for TV, film, and, you know, Broadway and West End musical productions and stuff like that. So he's really hard to get a hold of. But most oftentimes, if I want a guitar solo, it's him that I'm going to call on because it's his sound that I want. So some of my songs are waiting for guitar solos. So yeah, it does mean that my output personally for my stuff is a little bit slower than output that I do for other people. Brett says, I find that working in slower tempos helps, not only in terms of playing the chord changes, but also allows for more interesting things with rhythm. Yeah, and also you can think, when you're thinking about blowing over the changes, if they're going by really, really fast, like, for example, Giant Steps, it's 2 chords per bar, kind of, but it's really, really high tempo. And so you have to, the only way really that I have found anyway, for improvising on those changes is 4 or 5 note patterns for each chord, because you don't get enough time to play anything else on those changes as they go by. Whereas if you slow Giant Steps right down to kind of a slow bossa nova or a rumba, for example, slow the tempo right down, get it to that kind of, maybe a slow mambo would work quite nicely for Giant Steps. There's much more room between each chord change, so you can play a little bit more lyrically rather than just depending upon trying to fit 5 note figures into each of the chord changes. The other approach that I find that works quite often is just forget the chord changes and find common tones. Steve Lukather talks about this a lot. So if you want to learn really good improvisational approaches from one of the best improvising guitar players out there, other than Larry Carlton, it's Steve Lukather. He's fabulous. I love Steve Lukather's playing a lot. He's great because he's so versatile. You know, he can play all the rock stuff. He can play all the pop and R&B stuff because that's his bread and butter. But he can play jazz as well, and he can play blues. He can play soul. He can play all of that stuff. He's got such a rich harmonic vocabulary that he can draw upon. But the thing I love about Steve Lukather is that he says, forget about the chord changes and find common tones between the chords as they go by, and use those as your kind of anchor points for either each of the chords or, every other chord. Find common tones and then link those together either diatonically or chromatically through passing notes and enclosures and things. And then this is what he does. So, he does have a whole litany of blues licks and pentatonic licks and things like that, but he's just like, those are great, but, more often not, the freest way to improvise is to not think about the chord changes and just think about common tones. So, for example, a D7, for example, or a D9 in this case, you've got the F sharp, the A, the C, the E, and the D available to you. So, for example, those kind of notes, think about other chords that you might find them in, for example. So in A7, you've at least got some. You've got the A and the E. And, if you make it into a 13 chord, you've still got the F sharp as well. So you've just got a C sharp now instead of a C natural. So finding kind of those common tones between chords, it does take some practice, and it does take thinking initially. But once you get the concept down, then it's you end up just not thinking about the chord changes. You think about these notes will fit over this passage here. These notes will fit over this passage here. And then you're able to create lines that are very, very melodic and very, very lyrical. Zuzumat says Herb Albert and Tijuana Brass is 91 years old in March. Yeah, Herb Albert, yeah, he'll be 91. Yes. Right, cool. DJ Vu says, I'm glad that many musicians go beyond established standards and introduce a new dimension to music, new solutions, a new perspective on creating music. Yeah, I mean, that's really what makes music move forward is, you know, the reason why bebop exists is because young musicians in swing bands were getting fed up with the Tin Pan Alley songs, you know, that they were having to play night after night. And, you know, they found the music kind of uninspiring and somewhat constraining. So they had to find a new way to open up these songs. Interestingly enough, you know, bebop basically developed out of taking those chord changes from those Tin Pan Alley songs, reharmonizing them with some tritonal substitutions, upping the tempo, and then using the upper extensions of chords like sharp 9s, sharp 11s, flat 13s, things like that to create melody, and then linking those melody tones together chromatically as well as diatonically to create a new melody. And then you have a new melody that didn't exist before. And so that's how they opened up these old songs and made them new. So things like I Got Rhythm, which was a George and Ira Gershwin song, very, very popular, very, you know, huge hit song. 1 O'Clock Jump is another one that got used by the beboppers, as well as Swonderful, which is another Gershwin song. Cherokee is another song that got used and then got opened up like a tin can. All these songs just got ripped open and then dressed up in new clothes. It's like, you know, new wine in new wineskins instead of, you know, in old wineskins. And that's what made bebop work. And then rock and roll comes out of a meeting of Chicago blues, Mississippi Delta blues, these and soul and gospel, and these things all come together to create rock and roll. And then from rock and roll, you get pop music fundamentally. And you know, so it's all about how these things just get moved forward. They get moved forward because somebody thinks about what we can do with these songs and make them different, what we can do with these harmonic ideas and make it different and make a new sound that hasn't existed before. And that was what Charlie Parker did. He basically did things with the alto saxophone that had never been done before. And then Coltrane with the tenor saxophone did things that you know, the tenor saxophone was basically still regarded as kind of like a low register accompaniment instrument. Coltrane basically extended the register of the instrument by almost a whole octave, developed overtone techniques and splitting note techniques, and he had some, you know, there's Albert Eiler and Ornette Coleman and other players that came along and did that as well, but it was mostly Coltrane that propelled that whole thing forward. And then you get to Michael Brecker, and then you get to Chris Potter, and you get to you know, so many great musicians nowadays that are around. But you know, the whole point that I'm making here is, you know, we stand on the shoulders of giants and we build on top of the platform that they lay. Yeah, so Lukather, Carlton, Robin Ford, Alan Holdsworth, I think is the guitar player to add to that collection. JW, absolutely. Diana Krall's version of Swonderful is, yes, it is just glorious. Diana Krall's version of Swonderful is absolutely just beautiful. As is her version of Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are. That is also glorious. And it also features Michael Brecker, whereas the original featured Phil Woods. So, but yeah, it's absolutely glorious. Anyway, we are over time. We are about 4 minutes over, and Ziggy has his meetup tonight in just under an hour's time. There is a link in the chat if you want to go join that and talk more about Studio Pro and making music using Studio Pro and what you would like to see in the future added to the program. Ziggy will host that, and he does a fantastic job of doing that. It's great to see the meetups back. I am so excited by them. And by all that's going to come out of them and get added into the future of Fender Studio Pro. It's very exciting. All right, folks. And on that note, I'll bid you a very, very, very fond farewell. And I will see you on Sunday for Sunday Night Live. Good night, everybody.